Okay, so you've heard a lot about various types of infrastructure that are being prepared. So why is this important? Why are we talking about things like more bike lanes? Why are we talking about a whole variety of types of infrastructure that we haven't seen? Well, as you know, I live in New Orleans, and New Orleans has got a Complete Streets Coalition and a whole group of people who are working on creating additional infrastructure around the city. Why does it matter? Why do people need to know about this? Well, here's a map of what existing infrastructure was in place about a year ago. Okay, you can see there's a couple of different types. The different colors represent different types from sharrows, shared lane markings, to dedicated bike lanes. So a few around the city, sort of congregated in the CBD area primarily, but a few out in some of the different parts of the city. Here's what's planned. Okay, that's a whole different picture. Now, as I mentioned, there are different types of infrastructure that are planned. So it's important to understand what is going in where and how those things work. I've done this presentation to a number of police groups in the city because they, of everyone, need to know exactly what the rules are and how they all work so that they can inform everybody else of how these things work and how to use them appropriately. So when I talk to them, particularly before I start, I say, you know what, traffic laws apply to persons riding bicycles. Same roads, same rights, same rules, except where you just can't, like a horn. You can't even have a horn on a bike. Turn signals, we have our arms to do that. We don't have turn signals on our vehicles. Okay, so a few do not apply. Now, we also need to talk about the exceptions to the whole thing about riding on roadways and paths. There are several that are listed in Louisiana statutes. The one I want to focus on is right here: to avoid objects, vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, animals, surface hazards, or substandard width lane, or any other conditions that make it unsafe to continue along the right-hand curb or edge of the roadway. Why do I bring that one up? Well, I bring that one up because that's important to note that pretty much says anytime you need to move left, move left. You don't need to use a bike lane. You don't need to stay in a bike lane. It's prudent to do so when those things exist and motor vehicles may not operate in bicycle lanes except when they're turning, when they're entering or leaving a roadway, entering or leaving a parking space, or in emergencies. So the reason that I started doing this at all was over for moving into a right-hand lane, a bicycle lane, and making a right turn from the bicycle lane. Police officer pulled him over and said, "You're not supposed to be in a bike." I said, later when he told me the story, I said, you need to not just less than 3 feet away as a motorist when you're passing a bicycle. And what a lot of people don't understand is that you may pass in a no passing zone when it is safe to do so. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of infrastructure that are being created. First, we have a shared lane. Those lanes have those crazy signs in them. It's a bicycle with 2 arrows over it. It's a shared use arrow or sharrow. What that says is that the lane is open to both bicycle and motor vehicle travel. Now, of course, every lane is open to motor and bicycle travel, depending on the situation. So this is really just something to notify motorists that they really ought to watch out for motorists, particularly in that space. It gets a little bit more involved as we move along. Buffered bike lanes. These are, I won't say they're common around in the New Orleans area, but there are several of them, and motorists really don't understand how to use them, actually, really, nor do cyclists. The bicycle lane is in the center of what used to be a general travel lane. Okay, this used to be a street with 2 lanes for travel plus a parking lane. So the bike lane is in the center of it. There is a buffer to the right that is allowed, that helps you to stay away from the door zone of cars, so you don't find yourself in a zone where somebody's going to open a door right in front of you and throw you into the street. And then there's also a buffer on the left-hand side. So that buffers you both from the moving traffic as well as the parked traffic. Now, it's important to note too, there are a lot of lanes that are being put in literally all over the country where the bike lane is here right next to the parked cars. I mentioned the threat of dooring. Dooring is when someone in a parked vehicle right next to you opens the door, you slam into the parked car, hopefully just get hit, hopefully do not get thrown into the general travel lane next to it, because that would be potentially very, very injurious, if not fatal, to a bicyclist. So this is a good example, actually, of where it's a space that if there were no buffered bike lane here, with a buffer on the left side and a bike lane, and then another buffer here, a bicyclist may choose not to ride in the bike lane. Because if there are a lot of cars parked along here, your eyes have to be on a swivel, right? You have to make sure that there's nobody going to open a door in front of you, and you can't always easily determine that. So in those kinds of situations, it's going to be one of those exceptions to the far right as practicable rule, and you must move further into the lane and go ahead and use one of the other travel lanes rather than the bicycle lane. Okay. A lot of people don't understand that you do not have to stay that far right. So this is something that comes up not only for a necessity for police to understand that, but for them to educate others to understand that bicyclists have the right of way whenever they need it in any travel lane. It gets more complicated. This is an area, one of the newer types of infrastructure that we're seeing in New Orleans, and it's only in a few places right now, and it has caused massive confusion. I will tell you that. Again, this roadway used to have 2 travel lanes and a parking lane. Okay, so what happened was, instead of putting the bicycle lane to the left of where cars normally would have parked, they're just flipped, so that the bicycle lane is closer to the curb. The parking lane is now further out into the street. Now, when they just put those up and didn't tell anybody how to use them, everybody said, "Excuse me, you want me to park in the middle of the street?" Not so good, right? They then put these bollards up and striped everything very carefully so that people would understand, no, this is no longer a travel lane. This is now a parking lane. And what used to be thought of as the bike lane is now on the other side of that. Okay, so it's just a shifting of how those things are designed. It's important, though, for people who are planning these to understand the dynamics of the neighborhood that it's going into. There's one area like this here in the city where this is close to a school. Okay, so what's the concern? Well, being close to a school means at middle of the afternoon, when school lets out, there are a lot of parents there who are just parking their cars. And now all of a sudden you end up with people just all over the place. And now 1 lane of traffic instead of 2 lanes of traffic. And then people trying to pull over from the left lane who want to bypass all of the people who are already waiting in line to move into the line, and therefore traffic is at a standstill. So it's something that's got to be taken into account very carefully in the planning of where these things are located, so that all the needs of the neighborhood are taken into account. Okay, so actually a very good treatment when applied in places that are appropriate. Okay, so this is a slightly different implementation of that. The reason I bring this up is that there's actually a sign here. It's a little small to see right there. I think on the next slide has it a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. Has a little more carefully illustrated, that actually tells bicyclists, go to the right. Motorists, go to the left. Okay. More signage. We need more signage. Let's make sure people are educated as to how to use these things. And then we won't have the conflicts between, the motorists and those darn cyclists who, want to do everything their way. Okay, so these are different approaches that are taken to solving that same problem, and some of them implemented a little bit more completely than others. Two-way cycle tracks. Okay, this is yet another level where you have traffic moving in one direction in the general travel lanes. This is all moving left to right across the screen here. And you've got traffic moving same left to right and traffic moving right to left on the bicycle path, the cycle track. Okay, so this is usually done in areas where you have a short distance between two other areas where it's easy to travel on either side of the street, but it's hard to connect. So what they'll do is they'll just put these in, they run a few blocks, and then it reverts back to the normal, move to the right side of the roadway kind of deal. We do also have a few of these here, and again, more coming in our area, and I'm sure you'll be seeing those in your area too. This one we don't have yet, and this one is really very cool, the bicycle boulevard concept. It's a regular street, usually a street that's parallel to one of the major streets. And I don't know examples in every town, so I just won't even worry about any, but if you've got a street that's a very commonly used arterial going from one part of town to another, but then there's a whole bunch of smaller residential or just whatever smaller streets nearby running in the same direction, then let's encourage bicyclists to use those rather than the major arterial. How can we do that? Well, let's make it as comfortable for them to use those streets as it is for the motorists to use the larger arterial. How can we do that? Well, it's a regular street, as I said, but every several blocks, now on those streets, you'll probably see a stop sign every several blocks. Okay, so instead of just a stop sign, what planners do then is, and engineers do, is to set that up as, okay, now you have to get off this street if you're a motorist. Okay, so go ahead and make a right turn here if you're a motorist. If you're a bicyclist, continue right on through. No stop sign, no problem. Okay, so now that becomes really like a highway for the bicyclist, as opposed to for the motorist. Motorists can move over a block and get on the regular highway. Bicyclists can continue down these. This creates a whole lot nicer world for everybody concerned, because the motorists can just go on their business, and the bicyclists can too. So they use bicycle cut-throughs, as I see here. Speed humps are then also sometimes used to slow the motor traffic down. Circles are sometimes used at some of the intersections. Curb extensions are used right here at the corners to basically bump that out to make the distance shorter for crossing for pedestrians, which makes it safer for pedestrians as well. And chicanes, where, on some of the streets that are done this way, there's a little bit of a sort of you got to sort of weave left, weave right, like you're slaloming down a hill on skis, because that's the way the street is designed. The curves are designed in order to slow you down. And people don't have to think about how to use those. They're self-evident. You're going to slow down if the road is kind of curving, weaving back and forth in front of you. You're going to go ahead and make that turn if you got a curb in front of you. It's not anything that we would then have to really educate people on to any great degree, because the obstacle's right there, and you go ahead and move around it. So this one, as I mentioned, it's coming. We haven't seen any of it yet, at least in New Orleans. I don't think there's any in Louisiana at this point, but they are in use in multiple other cities. Okay, I'm sorry, there's a picture of some other approaches. Anyway, the one that kind of scares me, actually, is the bike box. Okay, it is a designated area at the front of a signalized intersection. It moves bikes to the front of the queue. Okay, so this is one that we have here in town. The bicyclist moves up the regular bicycle lane on the right side, then moves in front of the traffic at the signalized intersection, and then can make a left turn without, and everybody sees him. Okay, the reason I'm not so crazy about these, personally, my opinion, is that if that light's green you're just going to go ahead and proceed down the bike lane. You don't need to worry about the bike box. If the light has just turned red, no problem. You can move down the bike lane. You can get in front of the motorists, and no problem, because they can see you easily. If the light has been red for a while, though, the motorist is waiting for the light to change, is not looking to the right, is looking at the red light signal. You